All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'm looking at Betsy here, see if we can run through the roll call real quick.
City of Marietta.
Here.
City of Wildemar. Here. City of Lake Elsinore.
Here.
Menifee.
Here.
Canyon Lake. Here. City of Temecula is here. Pechanga. Paula, she is in Washington, D.C. Congressman Calvert's office. Senator Stone's office. Assemblywoman Marie Waldron's office. Supervisor Chuck Washington's office. RCTC. WRCOG. Riverside County. SCAG. Caltrans.
Thank goodness.
San Diego, Sandag. And CHP. And Marine Corps Camp Pendleton is here.
All right, I'm going to have Mayor Pro Tem Nagar lead us in the pledge while we get started here.
Please stand with me and say with me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all.
Is there an amen over there? We got an amen.
All right, Mr. Miller.
Off the back of my head.
All right, let's go ahead and see if we have any public comment this evening. Start there. Do we have any public comment?
Nope, none that I've received.
All right, seeing none, I'm going to dispense with the reading, and we will move straight over to committee business. And first up, we have Caltrans planned operational improvements along the I-15. Good afternoon. I understand you might have some decent news for us today.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Tom Ainsworth. I'm over Intelligent Transportation Systems for Caltrans District 8. Our director was here in June, and he talked about our thoughts on what were the best projects to address the congestion problem in the area. I was asked to kind of give a recap of what we talked about and how Caltrans plans to support this task force. Let me see. So I'll quickly talk about Caltrans' role in transportation, what kind of operational issues we see in the area, what kind of improvements we're going to make, and what we're going to do going forward. Some of these slides you'll recognize as from the last presentation. So Caltrans no longer has a responsibility to add capacity to the system. We don't build new lanes, we don't add interchanges anymore, we don't build new freeways. That's a responsibility of the local regional transportation agency. And in this case, that would be RCTC. But we are over the maintenance operation of the system. So below are the type of the projects we do, and we're going to concentrate on the operational improvements today. Go ahead. So these are the operational issues we see in the area. This is kind of a recap. We see weaving up in the north end of the 15215. We see emerging issues at all the interchanges at the on and off ramps. We have local system capacity issue where the off-ramp signals back up onto the freeway. The traffic backs up and it slows down the freeway. We see trucks slowing down at inclines and just traffic incidents in general, which is everywhere, but here it's a bigger problem because you really have no viable alternate routes. Next slide. So this is where we identified operational issues. Go ahead to the next slide. We have a little demonstration video of those areas. This is the north end where we have the weaving issue. This is actually one of our newest cameras at Caltrans on the 15-215 interchange. Next slide. This is Rancho California southbound off-ramp, and you see it backing onto the freeway. At this particular time, there wasn't a lot of volume on the freeway, But you can see if there was a higher volume, it would slow the freeway. Next slide. And this is at the truck scales where the trucks are trying to merge into traffic, and they actually have to slow. They aren't going fast enough to merge traffic, so they slow down traffic. Go next slide. So these are the improvements that we recommend. We're recommending ramp metering. We need to break up those queues as they enter the freeway. We want to add auxiliary lanes. I have a slide for that. Add acceleration lane so we can get those trucks up to speed before they merge into traffic. And then incident management to have better response to accidents and get traveler information out to people. Next slide. We have an existing project in construction. It's due to complete in winter of 2018. It is on schedule. And we're installing traffic signals, communication of traffic signals, detection stations, change of message signs, and closed circuit TV cameras. And what this does, it gives us a better ability to do incident response, to respond to accidents. Our TMC in Fontana can see incidents through the cameras. We can have we can dispatch our resources better to address that particular accident. We can also post traveler information on our change of message signs. Oh, thank you. And then on our websites and stuff. Okay. Yeah, this one isn't working. All right, no problem. So as far as our new projects, so both Temecula Parkway and Winchester already have projects either under construction or in design where they're going to add ramp meters. But there's no ramp meters planned for Rancho California Road. So we're proposing to add ramp meters there. We would widen the on-ramps. We don't want traffic backing onto the local streets and causing any more traffic issues. We also, it's not our intent to have people wait a long time at the on-ramps. We just want to break up the queues so you don't have long lines of cars entering the freeway and breaking down the traffic into congestion. Next slide. So we propose adding auxiliary lanes. This is just a little diagram. You see at a standard on-ramp, you have a limited amount of space to merge into traffic. And when we get high volumes, you don't have the gaps a lot of time to merge in effectively without slowing down and then slowing traffic too. So with an auxiliary lane, we add a lane between the on and off ramp, and it gives more time for people to merge, speed up, slow down. If somebody's not letting you in, you can get by them, and it's a better merge, and it actually increases the throughput of the freeway. Next slide. These are the locations we want to add auxiliary lanes. It's basically between Temecula Parkway and Winchester Road. We also are going to do some median widening or some widening at Rancho California. So we can have a two-lane off-ramp there. Right now, there is a two-lane off-ramp. But the off-ramp shares the number 4 lane. So when the second lane of the off-ramp backs up, it backs up in the number 4 lane and causes congestion. Next slide. We're also proposing to add an acceleration lane at the way station. Right now, trucks are merging onto traffic in an uphill section and an incline. So we're going to extend that lane and get it over the hill. So trucks have a longer time to accelerate, and they're also going downhill when they merge into traffic. Next slide. So these are the costs. We actually updated the costs. We took a deeper look into the costs. They're a little bit higher than we had in our last presentation. I think we're going to have to do more grading. We have to do some drainage work, and there's some pinch points at some of the bridges that we're going to have to put in some walls, so they're a little bit higher. But if you look at these projects, as far as transportation is concerned, those aren't high-cost projects. Those are doable in the shop. And these are the projects that we are proposing, the way they would be organized. 4 projects. When I left here last time with the director, he talked about just doing 1 project, but we decided to split them up. So if we have another project in the area, we can add it to that project much easier than trying to do a big, $15 million project. Next slide. So Caltrans is going to initiate these projects. We're going to fund them through the SHOPP. We're going to try to explore other funding opportunities if there is opportunities. Because right now, the SHOPP is a 10-year program. So it'd probably be about 7 or 8 years before we get these projects built. There is a lot of projects in the queue. So we look for other, if we get other funding, we can put them up in the queue. We're also looking at other ways to accelerate projects due to the size of these projects. If a project has problems with their environmental clearance, or if they have problem, or if we get a new estimated cost and it's lower, sometimes we're able to move projects in and out of the SHOPP. So we can try to move these projects in. And that's what we're going to try to do as we move forward. So go ahead. So that's basically it. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
I got a question. Thank you, Mr. Ainsworth. I appreciate the presentation. I wanted to ask you about a potential auxiliary lane northbound, just north of Winchester Road, going towards the 215 split there. There's lots of right-of-way, and there's a lot of backup right there heading north. And I'm wondering, have you given much consideration to that?
So I actually had a slide about the French Valley Parkway project, but everything north of Winchester is handled by the French Valley Parkway project. So they're on their second phase. I believe they did the first phase. The second phase is due to go out about this time next year, and they're still trying to get the third phase funded. It's not in there. So yeah, that's handled by that project.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Hi. Do you have examples of where the auxiliary lanes have been beneficial? In the Corona area, I think they had them off and on maybe before these big changes, but they seem to almost cause more of an issue because people in traffic moved over into those lanes to jet forward and then come back in. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we've done them. I mean, it's a common practice to put those in, and people do use them to pass if they're long enough. A lot of times we do it on shorter, when interchanges are located pretty close together. But we did them in Redlands, and we just actually striped them in. We had a wide median there, and there was a big change between Waterman and I think California Street there. So if you look there. Yeah, we striped in, one day we striped in those lanes, and the traffic was moving really well. I think we had a slide last time on latent demand. Latent demand. So that is demand that's out there on the local streets that if they could be on the freeway, they would, but they're not because it's congested, right? So people leave earlier. A lot of things contribute to when people use the freeway and if they use the freeway. So sometimes when you clear up an issue, you get more people on the freeway. But overall, the overall congestion of the local streets and the freeway are better. And it really is a proven method. We do get more throughput through when we put in these improvements. I think CVAG talked about the throughput we were getting on this segment of freeway before. And we should be getting about 2,000 vehicles per hour per lane. And times four lanes here, about 8,000 vehicles per hour. And we're only getting 6,000 to 7,000. And that's because of these operational issues that we're having. And we think if we clear those up, we can get more throughput through and just overall make it more efficient.
Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. First, thanks for being here and your presentation.
Certainly.
A couple of questions. You stated, and it's been bandied about, so we know about it, that Caltrans is no longer into the adding capacity.
Yeah.
Has that official policy decision been made? In other words, as local electeds, we need to be able to tell our constituents something. That's pretty important. Something that I'd like to be able to tell our constituents is that now that it's under our responsibility to widen the freeway lanes because Caltrans won't do it or has made a policy shift. So that's my first question.
Yeah, so that was, I don't know how many years ago, that was an actual bill, and that gave 75% of the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Program, to the local agents, to the RTPAs, or RTAs. So the other 25%, Caltrans still has control over, but in that 25%, it's mostly for interregional traffic, for truck and that kind of stuff. And we only control about 15% of that. So when you look at all that, we have almost no control over increasing the capacity, and it's all been given over to the local agencies. And the STIP the money in the STIP has went down over the years just to maintain the existing system. So there isn't a lot of money in there. Most of it is measure money that they use to improve capacity.
So there was an existing bill that changed the policy of Caltrans.
Yeah,
Is that,
they
okay.
gave it local control.
And gave it to local control.
Yes.
Can we pull that? I think we just need to have that. And that way we can make the statement with absolute certainty that it's now our responsibility to handle the freeways and the widening of the freeways. I think
Yeah, I
that's
can
very
get that.
important. Okay.
Yeah, I can email that to you then?
Yeah, great, thank you. And then the second question, maybe both for you, Mr. Thomas, and I'm sorry, your name again was?
Tom Ainsworth.
Tom Hainsworth, thank you, sir. Regarding the French Valley Parkway, we have about $32 million in STIP pending, correct?
Actually, it's a total of 47 million.
47 million. And we're informed that that may be in jeopardy because of SB1, if SB1 passes. My question is, or Prop 6, thank you, appreciate that. My question is, are we, I noticed funds out of the STIP funds were given to Highway 60 and the Badlands because they were ready to go. And so STIP monies, they got theirs, and that's going to be under construction. Why are we not getting our STIP money? It's been programmed. We have plans. Is it because the plans aren't ready to go? And if the plans aren't ready to go, is it Caltrans that's holding up those plans? Can you elaborate that on?
Well, first of all, it is not Caltrans that's holding up the plans. We are working with them as the final, we're revalidating the environmental document and preparing the final plan. So we are working with Caltrans on that, but they're not holding us up. We're still in the process. And just to address your question about the funding, so we're programmed, those $47 million are programmed in the STIP in year 2021. And that was approved by RCTC and the CTC, so that's where it is in the program.
Got it.
However, if the Prop 6 passes and the gas tax is repealed, the allocation of the funding into the STIP program is going to need to be revisited. And because a majority of that amount is from the new gas tax, the SB1 gas tax. So since we're in the third year of that STIP program, what we've been told is there's still uncertainty as to whether those funds would need to get reprogrammed or, deprogrammed if the gas tax is repealed. So we're not sure.
Got it. So we're in the queue. If Prop 6 passes and that's repealed, there's going to be still some money there, but we may or may not get any. We don't know. That's it. Okay. And the only reason why we haven't pulled the trigger now is because we're just waiting our place in line? Is that pretty much it?
We're waiting our place in line, and we're still in the process of finalizing the plans.
Okay, when would plans be finalized so that we can make a push to get those funds?
Our plan right now is that we will have final plans ready by about the end of next year, and we'd be ready to go to construction in 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Which is when we would intend to receive the funds in that program.
And do we need any of those funds in order to get the project ready?
No.
Okay, where are we funding getting the project ready?
We have TUMP funds, we have other local funds, we have some other federal funds, so we've got a variety of funding sources in that project.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Hainsworth.
Thanks.
Greg?
Hey, Tom, real quick, when you mentioned your schedule and your ability to move things up, back and forth, let's say as a group, this task force was able to identify funding to seed the projects you identified. Would we be able to accelerate them and the delivery that way? Or is this solely Caltrans's?
No, typically on SHOPP projects, if we get local funding or local match or some type, it goes to the top of the line.
Got it.
So, you know, what the schedule on that would be, I can't say right now, but it
Sure,
would,
sure.
it would accelerate the project.
You're going through the PIP process to get it into the shop.
That's
And
exactly
then
right.
you have to check the boxes as far as the process goes, the environmental clearance, get the designs done and everything.
Yes.
But let's say on a slow play, all that takes 3 years. We're still 4 years out from seeing any hard and fast construction.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
All right, just a couple other quick ones then. So follow up on what Greg and Mike were talking about, the funding. Is any of this, like your plan here, it's roughly what, $15 million on you know, metering, auxiliary lanes, acceleration lanes, so forth. Timing wise, that's looking about 4 years, best case scenario, or, I'm sorry.
yeah. So if we just went through the full process, I think it would be, they would do the project study report starting in 2022, and it would go on. So it would be 7 to 8 years if we just went through the normal process. Right now, there's a large queue of you know, projects, and we'd have to knock somebody out right now. Now, some projects do fall out, like I said, so there would be opportunities, and we'll look for those opportunities, but that's what we're looking at right now.
All right, so what, as a task force or as a region, what could we do to help accelerate and either make sure we're securing the funds or, you know, accelerating either the review, environmental, or, you know, our place in the queue?
So yeah, so if we get some kind of matching funds or something like that, that would help. You know, there's other grants and programs out there that maybe if you could secure, we could move some of this stuff forward fairly quickly.
And are of that list of projects, are some of them, you know, lower hanging fruit than others? So metering, for instance, is that,
Yeah,
you know, a faster project?
The two, you see the two projects at about 1 and 1.1 million. We'll see if those can move forward faster, because that's not that hard to fund, really, you know, that size of project. But the auxiliary lanes, which can really, you know, really help the congestion, those are a little bit harder to fund.
Okay, and then do you have a sense on environmental review? I mean, what kind of hurdles are we talking about? Because, you know, I don't see a lot of impact to, I mean, there's no habitat issues, there's no major watershed issue. I mean, it's, you know, yeah, so what, I mean, what would be our major hurdles on that end?
I think it's pretty straightforward environmentally, and right-of-way, obviously, those are two big things. Environmental right-of-way is what really delays a project, but, you know, I do think there's kind of a drainage through there, so there might be a couple things that come up, but I don't see a lot environmentally that would be a problem.
Okay, Greg, did you have?
We can attack, let's just say the auxiliary lanes that you identified there,
Yeah.
those don't have to go in all at once. We can attack them one at a time, one direction at a time, if funding gets identified.
Yeah, I actually had the estimate actually on each side, each individual lane. I kind of put them together as one, because normally we put them in
No
at the same
problem.
time.
Just for the group's clarification, you can even chop this pie into smaller pieces.
Okay.
And if we get funding identified, move those forward.
Great, okay. And is it Bob? Bob.
Thank you, sir. First of all, Mr. Ainsworth, thank you for coming forward with a plan. I want to say that very clearly. You came forward with a plan, and I really love that and I respect that. Secondly, my colleague, Mr. Nagar, spoke about Prop 6. I think we need to be prepared for the reality that is going to pass and that funding is going to go away. I've asked the executive director of RCTC and our current chair to be ready to form a committee to go after Plan B. When this thing fails, we need to have Plan B, and we need to be in front of the CTC and make sure that our projects that are ready to go continue to get funding. And this task force should put everybody on notice that we're we're joining the game as well, and we're next in line. And then lastly, Mayor Rahm, on the environmental concerns, I can't help myself. Didn't you guys have a mountain lion that came under the freeway over here? I think there might be a couple of issues that the wildlife people would want to address.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
You guys did that.
It stimulates some thought, and I'm interested in what my colleague, Mr. McGee, said on a couple of levels. First of all, if there's a fund shortage in getting French Valley Parkway ready to be funded and kicked off, do you know approximately how much that is? I mean, just throw out a number, Pat. I don't need to hold you.
Well, with the STIP funding, we will be fully funded
Well, I guess here,
for phase 2 only,
well,
correct?
here's what I'm saying is we're not ready because there's still, as you indicated, another year and a half worth of work to do.
Right.
Is that strictly a time issue or is that a money issue? And the reason why I bring it up, because it speaks to what my colleague just brought up. What I'm saying is, if it fails, and we want to make the case that we want to get our STIP money, how do we make that case? Is that we're ready to go, we're ready to build, and we're throwing in local money, or who knows what? So where are we at in relation to getting it ready? Is it just statutory time limits that won't get us there, or are we short funds?
We're not short funds. It's really just time. It's time to complete this revalidation of the environmental documents. We're going through recertification of the air quality conformity, preparing the final construction drawings. That's what we are anticipating taking us another 12 to 14 months.
Got it.
Just if I could add too, I think on paper, we're funded through the existing gas tax that hasn't yet materialized into the city's coffers. So that's why we're out to 2020. So what happens in November, what we all think will occur, I think we'll leave the French Valley Interchange Phase 2 short probably $35 million that we otherwise would have gotten.
Well, and see, but what I'm hearing from everybody is that's uncertain. Presuming that SB 1 gets repealed with Prop 6, there's still funds there, and there are people who are programmed ahead of us, so we don't know just how much funding that is or whether or not our number will come up. Some will fall by the wayside, as was indicated. I guess putting ourselves in the absolute position to be able to make the case that we're ready now, I think is paramount. And not say, well, we have 2 years, so let's not rush it because we're not getting the money anyway. If this thing gets repealed, it's game on to make a case.
Sure.
You follow where I'm coming from?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we're moving forward as quickly as possible now to be in that ready position.
The second thing I want to ask is I wonder, and I'm all for Plan Bs. Plan Bs are good. What if we found another mechanism to fund some of what your plan is, okay? You're anticipating not having the funds for that. I think you mentioned almost 8 years. Is that what?
Yeah, that's correct.
Is there any way to guarantee those funds in 8 years from you guys? In other words, let's say we just say, you know what, 8 years is fine by us. We'll look for you to come up with that money in 8 years. And then we go to work and find that money in the interim, knowing you're going to reimburse us. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, it could, things happen. There's been a hunger for congestion relief in general. We've been asked to prepare some of these congestion relief type projects, the operational improvement type projects. So, I think if we don't have a repeal, I think it probably will move forward. I don't think that anything will get in its way. But then if you guys later decide, hey, we found some money and we want to accelerate it, I think we could accommodate that.
Well, okay. So let me chunk that down for a minute and sort of peel that back. If SB 1 is upheld, Prop 6 fails, then all things being equal, we're in line and things should occur the way we'd like them. But if we find money, I mean, I think your plan indicated that it's about, what, 15 million, if I saw that? We can sell bonds for 15 million bucks. The debt service on that is relatively very small. So we can come up with that money now, but we need a source to repay it. Obviously, whether it's Temecula, this group, a number of cities, who knows how we would sell bonds or do it. Let's just assume we can sell bonds and come up with 15 million bucks. We need a source of repayment. I'm kind of alluding to, can we count on Caltrans money 8 years from now to pay that back?
Yeah, I'd have to ask our funding people. I just don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I think we could, but I would just have to get talk to one of our funding
Can we
people
put
about
that on our radar screen? I think that's something worth looking into. $15 million, I mean, between Lake Elsinore and Temecula, we got that no problem.
Yeah, and the couch cushions, yeah.
Well, and everybody else in between. It wasn't
No, I was pushing Mr. McGee's buttons. He's very good at not letting his buttons be pushed.
And we got one pillow, you got a couch, okay, so.
No,
We'll shake the pillow.
no, but I like.
I get it.
You got it, yeah. I like that. There's some opportunities there if we get creative. So 2 things. We don't want to fall behind anticipating we have time on the French Valley Parkway. And number 2, if we have a repayment source, we can come up with 15 million bucks. We can come up with that in 6 months. And my city manager's cringing over there.
He can do it.
Yeah.
We're printing money next door.
Anyway,
That's the chain side of it, sorry.
All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Yeah, Glenn.
So when you say the SHOPP money, who decides, since your region, District 8 is huge, one of the largest 2, counties combined, who decides where the SHOPP and what mechanism decides which property or which lane is more important? Is it the district director for Caltrans? Is it a group of engineers? Because this corridor here, anywhere in Riverside County, is probably the most vital for traffic going in and out and for economic growth in the county of Riverside. So how do you decide when there are new projects come in, where they fit in line and that?
So everything else is pretty clear. Have that list. We have all of our drainage problems identified, all of our pavement problems. We kind of grade the pavement, poor, good, fair. So all that stuff is pretty straightforward. The operational improvements are a little less straightforward, but we do know where all the congestion is, right? And everybody knew about the congestion problem here when I went and talked to people about it. Everybody understood it. And right now it's at the top of the list of our operational improvements to do
And
that.
it's
There's
7
other
years out.
locations, we're actually looking right now at other locations that we could do these type of projects. Because they're all over the district, obviously.
True.
You guys have probably noticed a big increase in traffic, just lately. As the economy improves, it's one of the indicators. Traffic is an indicator too. So there is a hunger for congestion relief right now. And so we look at the actual congestion. We have different ways of looking at that, but that's what we look at.
And it's still 7 years out, even though it's at the top of the list?
Yeah, well, there's a list of projects, a long queue of projects. And, as advertised in SB1 or the gas tax, that we're doing paving first and we're fixing the bridges and the drainage first. And on top of that, we're doing these type of projects.
Okay. Not so sure on that one. Drainage net doesn't make money. Traffic, people sit in traffic, time, quality of life is more important to us
Yeah,
personally than that.
I think
So-
just kind of recently, we've had a better push that hey, we need congestion relief. The people expected congestion relief when this passed. And, it's good to fix everything, and we're doing that. But there was an advertised outcome that there will be congestion relief, and we're starting to push those projects forward, too.
Thank you.
I have something to add. So the congestion is, as we all know, it's from people going somewhere. And I think it would be good for our committee to engage the people where they're going in trying to solve this $15 million problem. Because we do, we have, especially if you can see it on the weekends for sure. The wine country, we have Pachanga, we have a lot of those type of tourist destinations, and a lot of people are benefiting from that, but a lot of them are sitting on the freeway trying to do that. In the meanwhile, the people that live here are being impacted because of that. So I think that's something that we should, look hard at, is engaging the people that are benefiting most from this, and trying to move this project forward so that we can, at least get this part of it with those improvements and see how that works. Because I think the sooner it gets done, the better, and the more benefit to everybody that is already benefiting from it, from the people coming down, to loosen that up. So.
All right, any other?
Well, Wildemar will do our share. We don't have a pillow and we don't have a sofa, but we do have a dirt floor with a little bit of, hay on it. And one cop, yeah, so we'll do what we can. But we're willing to put a toll road through our section of the freeway.
All right.
At least on Bunny Canyon. Yeah, there's no easy answer. What I was kind of curious, before SB1 got put in on all of our backs, what was the amount of money you guys had ready to go for French Valley? Because, you couldn't have been planning on SB1 because we didn't know it was going to be done until later, so, and I know you guys have planned for a while.
Well, the project actually was fully funded in the STIP program. I want to say it was
2 years ago.
3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then, yes.
Yeah.
And then the state realized that the old gas tax that was coming in wasn't coming in as much as had been prior. So they reprogrammed the STIP and defunded that part of the French Valley project.
By a like amount.
Correct, yeah.
So they backfilled it with the
And then with the
anticipated
new gas tax, they augmented the STIP program again and refunded it again.
So that's a hard sell. That's a hard sell for the people that are paying it every day, because we know it's been backfilled, but we also know where they took the money in the first place in the other pot. It went in general fund, and so we're just running around in circles here.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you doing this. This is exciting. This is, when we started this months ago, this is a huge step forward in the conversation. So thank you so much for putting in the hard work to get us to where we are today, and we'll keep advocating and doing what we can as a task force in a region to make sure we get those funds in place and see if we can accelerate this as much as possible.
Oh, thank you. We're happy we could do something.
All right, thank you. All right. All right, next up is Mr. Thomas. We've got a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan.
All right, well, unfortunately, no graphics for this presentation. So.
All right.
Well, what I wanted to do is to basically update you on one of the several SB1 programs that is being worked on kind of at the state level, and then ultimately would work its way down to the local level. And I don't want to create any false expectations. So this program is not going to result in $15 million anytime soon. But it is a program, like I said, that's part of the SB1 program. I think it's ideally intended for corridors such as the I-15 corridor to be able to fund improvements to corridors like that. It's called the Solutions for Congested Corridors Programs, or SCCP. It's one of the programs that the state created to fund projects with the SB1 funds. It's intended to generate funds for projects that are involving congested corridors, to reduce congestion, to create a balanced set of transportation, environmental, and community-oriented improvements. So funding for this program, again, coming from SB1, they've allocated $250 million a year out of the SB1 program to fund these projects, which is not a small amount of money, but in order to be funding projects on a statewide level, It's a competitive program, so projects would need to be submitted to the CTC, evaluated on their merits, and then those funds would be allocated based on the highest priority projects. In order to be funded through this program, the CTC, the California Transportation Commission, is also developing guidelines for preparation of comprehensive multimodal corridor plans. So in order to receive funding through this program, a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan has to be created to be able to apply for these funds. RCTC is in the process of working on preparing these comprehensive corridor plans for the major corridors in Riverside County that would allow us to then submit projects to the CTC for the portion of these funds. RCTC got a grant from Caltrans, a $500,000 grant from Caltrans to work on preparing these corridor plans once these guidelines come out, and we'll be working on those. So I wanted to make sure I brought that to the attention of all the RCTC board members here. When these guidelines come out, the commission will be able to move forward with preparing these corridor plans, which will then allow us to submit projects for funding through this program. And again, that's all assuming that SB1 is not repealed, because all of these funds are coming from the SB1 program. So I just wanted to bring that to all of your attention, that there is another program being created at the statewide level to provide funding for congested corridors. So if this source of funds remains available, we will be able to pursue that funding for the I-15 corridor, work with RCTC to prepare this comprehensive corridor plan, and then move forward with submittal of projects. So I just wanted to bring that to your all attention, that program is potentially going to be available if the Prop 6 is not successful. And then we would be able to pursue funds to be able to make improvements to corridors such as the I-15. And that concludes my presentation.
Can you define for me what multimodal corridor plan actually is?
Well, it's, this is what the CTC is in the process of doing right now. They are preparing the guidelines for how those plans will be prepared. It's intended to be a comprehensive plan for the corridor because of the fact that multimodal means of transportation is what is being seen as kind of the future for transportation. I'm sure these corridor plans are going to have to address multimodal forms of transportation. And this, again, it's a statewide program, so this applies to all of the freeways throughout the state. I would imagine it would include potentially, light rail systems on corridors, bicycle transportation on corridors, other forms of transportation that would be part of a more comprehensive plan. Now, in our case, because of the fact that there really doesn't exist other modes of transportation on the 15 corridor, I would imagine those other forms of transportation would not be as significant as just the vehicles on the corridor.
Okay, thank you. Greg?
Pat, they're in the process of finalizing the guidelines. I know you were researching this a little bit. Are agencies such as RCTC able to comment on those?
They are, yeah, and
Because
RCTC
I would
has
encourage
been,
us to evaluate those, and then if the guidelines come out and they kind of steer money away from our corridor because we don't have rail or we don't have HOV lanes or something like that, comment on the guidelines to help make our projects more competitive.
right, yes, and I know RCTC has been engaged in this process of creating these guidelines. They've been working with the CTC. I believe the guidelines are intended to be finalized sometime in the next couple of months. So we expect that the guidelines will be finalized soon, and then RCTC will be moving forward with preparing these comprehensive corridor plans using the grant funds that they receive through Caltrans. So, we want to stay closely engaged with RCTC as they work on the preparation of those plans.
All right. You know, I know we've talked in the past about making this section of the freeway corridor a project for RCTC again. Can you give us an update on where we are with that?
They did include the segment of I-15 between the 215 and the South County boundary in the Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP. They included it in the strategic project section of the RTP, which is really the long-range projects, but it is actually in the plan. Also, SCAG has just started the process of updating their RTP, their Regional Transportation Plan, for 2020, and we will definitely be advocating for hopefully giving this project a higher priority as part of the new Regional Transportation Plan.
Sure, because I know part of the strategy we talked about earlier was not just, you know, making this another, you know, project again, but also our ability, once it is, to be able to advocate for different, you know, colors of money and at least, you know, get us in the ring so we can fight for it. So how close are we to be able to start unleashing our state or federal lobbyists on some of these solutions?
Well, they are starting the update to the RTP. I think the most effective way of trying to prioritize is really through the RCTC, is by us and the commissioners knowing that this is a high priority corridor and attempting to channel funds here. The project, the 15 express lanes project north of us is under construction. They've identified funds for that next segment, or at least the environmental studies for that next segment from, I believe it's Cajalco down to the 74, but nothing beyond that. So we're just you know, still continuing to press to have this considered a priority corridor. We're also hoping that RCTC will be at our next task force meeting to give us a further description of where they stand with this this particular congested corridor program, and as well as maybe we can ask them to do an update on the new RTP.
Okay. And then from a federal perspective, you know, last time I was in DC and actually earlier this week, there's still this conversation swirling about bringing back earmarks. Obviously a lot more constrained than I think they had been in the past, but you know, I think both sides of the aisle are interested in trying to revitalize that. And you know, I've heard as early as this year. Now I think everybody's distracted with other issues currently, but it keeps coming up and a lot more frequently than it had in the past. And so, you know, we had talked about coordinated efforts and you know, sort of coordinating our federal lobbyists and so forth as well. I think it's probably a good idea that we continue that conversation sooner rather than later. So, you know, if there is an opportunity, we're coordinated, we have, you know, an idea of what we're trying to accomplish, and we can start jumping on that in some sort of fashion. So I'd like to make sure we get that out for our next meeting as well. All right, any others?
A general discussion?
Yeah, I mean, if no more questions on that, then any other comments or questions? I think that's what we got next.
If I may.
Mike?
I'm really appreciate you coming forward with a plan and saying that Caltrans was going to get behind those interim projects. Mr. City Manager, between all the cities here, we can find a way to come up with $15 million. If this effort did anything, it could do that and start to do that. I think that's a doable thing. I'm wondering, in order to start those projects, you need to start plans and environmental and all that. So just thinking roughly, if we had the money, what would it take? Like 2 years to get plans and construction-ready documents?
Yeah, we'd start out with a project study report, and it would, yeah, do you have an idea? For the PSR year, and then... So yeah, it would be more like 4 years or 4 to 5 years, probably.
So
Yeah, there may be opportunities to accelerate that, but
So let's look at a timeline here, if you can indulge me. If we wait 8 years till we know Caltrans can fund it, then best case scenario, and we know the price of it's gonna go up, okay, if we wait 8 years, then the best case is 4 years after the 8 years, or a total of 12, is when we would even begin to start doing it. Is that a fair statement? I mean, I'm just doing the math. 8 years before you can fund it, and 4 years just to start to get in a position to begin construction.
now the funding would be somewhere around 2022. That's when the funding would be secured for that.
So 2022, you would have the 15 million that you were talking
That's
about?
when it would be, well, we would start the PID process, so it would be like a year after that. So that would be 2023, I guess, yeah.
So 2023, you'll have the money
On the current track, yeah,
to,
track
to,
right now.
to begin the process.
Yeah.
And just to get it ready for construction will be another 4 years, not counting construction, is what I'm saying.
So we would be, at that point, we'd be through the PSR phase. We'd have to do the project report and plans and specs and all that stuff. So that's probably another 3 years after that.
Okay, so best case scenario under that is, just to start, under that is 7 years.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm, okay, 7 years. Okay. And if we had the funding, boy, it almost seems like it wouldn't make a difference. If we had the funding by this time next year, it wouldn't look, we'd save 2 years, I guess. Is that the difference between 2019 and 2023? We're looking at, we'd save 3 years. Is that, is that?
Maybe, I don't know, I'm hearing that you got, at least 2 years for, the engineering and drawings and everything, and then another year, so it's like 3 or 4 years.
To be ready to break ground.
I think what Mike's asking is if we drop 15 million on the table right now and gave it to you, how long would it take
Yeah.
to be able to do the project?
Yeah. That's it, yeah.
Sure, the mechanism to get this done is RCTC. So while my colleague is looking for a quicker path, first step is the project study report. And on something like this, I'm just ballparking it, it's probably about $1 million. Now, I think that this needs to be part of Plan B with RCTC when we outline what it is we want going forward. If Prop 6 passes and now we're scrambling and we're going to be knocking on your door, making sure that Inland Empire projects continue to get funded because our taxpayers are continuing to feed the coffers, this project study report needs to be funded. While that is moving forward, because again, RCTC has to be the lead, then we can look at those other ideas that you have on other funding options. But if we don't get to go, which is the project study report, you don't go nowhere. And so all the ideas about money and funding, it's tough for us to reach out to our constituents and talk about funding X when we don't have step one done yet. So that would be my recommendation is that we look to RCTC under our Plan B scenario to fund the project study report. They're already looking at another one on the corridor.
Bob, may I?
Well, I just wanted to follow up with that real quick and just, is it, if the funding were through some other mechanism, not RCTC, not Caltrans, not, whatever pool, let's just say we get a magic, $1 million to kick off the study or whatever needs to be done, are we short-circuiting the RCTC process at that point? I mean, can we just skip over that and
So
go straight into?
I don't want to be a bureaucrat, but at some point, we got to go to the CTC, and we got to get a permit from these guys in order to do anything on their right-of-way. Remember, it's their right-of-way.
Sure. But I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is how would you short-circuit that? Because if the funding's there, I realize we still need the permits, but, how do we jump over a few of those hurdles? So, where we just, let's pretend we had a check right now and I mean, because we're not talking about major construction, we're just talking about a couple of, auxiliary lanes and, a little bit of asphalt.
I hate to embrace the bureaucracy, but I truly believe in RCTC being the quickest most efficient mechanism to get that done. If we went out and hired XYZ engineer and environmental firm, I believe that we would run into some obstacles in processing. That's just what my gut tells me. I'm not concerned about, I mean, if the group wants to try something, okay. I just think that using our folks at RCTC, of which we all are voting members, I think that's our most powerful tool. Mike?
Yeah, let's make a distinction, because I wonder if we're talking about two different things. Maybe you can clarify, because the Prop 6 SB1 track and what we have $47 million passes, doesn't pass, that's kind of its own thing. That's on its own. What I'm talking about is $15 million to implement what Thomas went ahead and put up on the board. Are you suggesting that as part of Plan B, Bob? Because I'm thinking it's a Plan A on its own track, of totally separate and distinct from whether or not SB1 gets repealed.
First step is getting that project study report approved. And I think the quickest step to getting that $1 million is RCTC.
So would
rather than passing passing this and watching everybody put dollars in. I would have a tough time selling that to my constituency because I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet.
Do you need a project?
Tom, you were talking about the SHOPP program, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so what Tom was talking about for his future project was part of the State Highway Operations Program, which is through Caltrans, and we do the PSR. But I understand where you're going with, if it was a project not part of the SHOPP, then I understand exactly where you're going. But I just wanted to clarify, Tom's proposal was for our SHOPP program, a future cycle. We do our PSRs in-house with our staff, and then that is your programming document.
Well, and that's what I was trying to get at is, so if we were able to go through that direction instead of the RCTC, and whatever mechanism, we were able to establish for funding and some sort of agreement that said in a, 5, 10, 15-year time frame, those bonds would be repaid, by Caltrans or however, let's just get creative with the mechanism. Is that an opportunity to accelerate that $15 million project outside of, this other process? Because, I mean, I agree, Bob. I think we need to go down all of these tracks at the same time, and whichever, turtle is the fastest, we use that one. But
There you are with the environmental again.
Right, exactly. But at some point, those are the tracks we're going to have to take, and so I'm willing to bet on all of these right now to move it forward, because we don't know what's going to happen, and there's always uncertainty here, but. But if this were an option, would that, is it worth pursuing as we're going down this other track as well?
So you're talking about sending funding to us, that's what you're saying? I think it's an option. I don't think either of us are programming people, so we'd have to talk about how that would actually work.
We're back to the $15 million in an envelope on your desk today question.
Yeah, right.
If we drop $15 million on your desk, how long would it take?
Yeah.
And the next question, and I guess is where I was trying to go with it, is if we had that money today or in 6 months, does it significantly help get, again, the French Valley Parkway is a separate and distinct track. It's either going to go with the STIP funds or it's not, and Plan B needs to be in place for that. But these things that you brought up, I'm wondering is if we had $15 million in the next 6 months and we said go for it, I'm hearing from you there's a 3-year ramp up from that period of time, or maybe incremental funding. If we got you $1 million, can we start this thing? And what does that timeline look like? Because, and I'll elaborate again where I'm coming from. Going back and telling citizens the best case scenario, even if we came up with $15 million in an interim, solution, is we don't get under construction for 8 years. That, I mean, that's best case. That's, we'd have to go out and say, we solved the problem. We're solving it. That's the good news. The bad news is, you know what, we won't start solving it until 8 years from now. That's a tough sell. So I asked you a lot of things, but if you had the money or portion of the money, do we save time and is it worth it?
Well, we could start the PSR earlier, so the whole, you know, process would shift up if you started the PSR earlier, yes. Because we're gonna start that right now, would it be 2022? Is that the next
So-
SHOPP cycle?
This type of a project is a mobility project, so it's not programmed as it's finished like a safety project would be done. It has to go through the cycle with the CTC. So all of our projects we're working on now and last year, they are due June 2019. They will be voted through the CTC spring of 2020, if all goes well, as a package statewide through all the districts. And then they will open their project approval environmental document sometime in the summer of 2020. So then they would finish those phases, design and construction, and go through that route. 3 or 4 years average once they start PA&ED. It depends on the complexity of the project, of course. You know, some projects are quicker than others.
Would the program that you put up there, would that be all part of one PSR, or are they all separate PSR for each project?
We were looking at separate PSRs. We may combine them at some point. We may put them as we may add them to another project. So there's a lot of different options that we're looking at.
So if we got you $1 million though, what would we say to get the process going? Do we save 3 years, 4 years? I'm still a little fuzzy on that.
To develop the programming document, the project study report, those usually in the SHOPP program, unless they're a really complicated, long-phased pavement project, they're usually done within a year, the PSRs. But it's a 2-year cycle anyways. They'll all sit until the CTC cycle unless it's a safety project that's automatically programmed as you go. We call that reservation.
So the CTC has to approve these
The
interim?
whole package,
The whole package.
statewide,
Okay, got
yes. It wasn't always that way,
Right.
but it is now. We still had a similar programming cycle, though, in the past.
Okay, thank you. Pat, is there something there that, what do you think?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is, and I think Tom mentioned earlier too, is if there's a local match, then the project could move up in timing and priority. And so I don't think they're suggesting that the locals would need to pay for all of it. You know, possibly, you know, a portion of the funds would come from the locals that would allow it to be accelerated.
How would we know? In other words, Tom has said in about 4 to 8 years, if I heard you correctly, that it'll meet your funding cycle, right? If we, and I asked, could we be reimbursed if we put up some of the money? But in a scenario where we put up half the money, does that make your funding happen sooner?
You know, in my experience, and I'm not sure about Tom's, what I'm familiar with is there's a local project on the system already going through programmed. We have a SHOPP project within the same limits, and there's some contribution partnering so that the projects can be simultaneously developed or staged. I'm not real familiar with locals contributing or accelerating the SHOPP process. That's something, as Tom said, we're not with the programming section, we'd have to check.
Right.
I am familiar with contributions from both sides to enhance a project or combine projects, but it's a different scenario. They're two different projects kind of working together, so we'd have to investigate that, your proposal.
Well, with the group's concurrence, Pat, could you maybe unpack that, unpeel that onion and see what the, I think you know me well enough to know where I'm going with this. Is it worthwhile coming up with this alternate source of funds? If so, how much time do we save? And how would the money work? We put up a portion, we put it all up, and it get paid back? How would it work?
Yeah, we'll have to sit down with the Caltrans folks here to try to sort that out.
Thank you.
All right. Any others? Well,
Are we have another meeting, or are we meeting again?
Our next, so let's see, our schedule reminder, look at that, Mike. We're following the agenda. Schedule reminder, final meeting of the year is on December 6th. And then, anybody want any closing remarks? Aside from thanks to Thomas and your staff for all the, Diane, thank you so much for coming out and joining us this afternoon.
Quick question, Mr. Mayor. Do we want to meet on December the 6th? What would be the agenda? Other than I like seeing you all, but.
Yeah, let's see how far we can get on some of these items and maybe.
Okay.
You know, I would recommend keeping it on the calendar. It's post-November election. There, you know, we'll kind of know our fate in terms of Prop 6 and sort of maybe
Okay.
it'd be a good time to have,
And then-
revisit some of those contingency plans. and
Okay,
so,
very
yeah.
good.
Yeah, and we'll actually try to meet with the Caltrans team here between now and then too, and maybe we can have some more, you know, updates on what we can do with those projects, with those operations projects.
All right, perfect. Well, get back on those freeways. Enjoy your ride home. Thank you all for coming. Take some cookies with you too. All right.